In 1955, every garage in America had 15 tools on the wall that any man could name. Hand those same 15 tools to his grandson. He won't get past 3. Number 7 has a 10-inch blade with a handle on each end. It looks like a weapon. It was the fastest way to shape a piece of wood in any American garage. Number 12 weighs less than a deck of cards. It kept every engine in America running for 60 years. The day it disappeared, a man stopped needing to understand how his own car worked. And number 3 has a suction cup on the end of a wooden stick. Your grandfather used it inside an engine block every spring. Ask a mechanic today what it is. He won't know. Subscribe before we start. Number 15. Number 15, breast drill. Heavy steel shaft, about 18 inches long, with a curved metal plate at the top and a crank handle on the side. The plate sits flat against your chest. You lean your body weight into it while turning the crank, and the bit on the other end bores into whatever you're pointing at. Before electric drills, this was how you put a hole through hardwood. The chest plate turned your rib cage into a press. A man could drive a half-inch bit through solid oak in under a minute. By 1960, Black & Decker's $16 electric drill made it a wall decoration. But the breast drill could go anywhere, no cord, no outlet, just a man and his body weight. Number 14, battery hydrometer. Glass tube about 10 inches long with a rubber squeeze bulb on one end and a colored float sealed inside. It looks like it belongs in a chemistry lab, not a garage. But every car battery in the 1950s had removable caps on top. You would squeeze the bulb, dip the tube into the battery acid, and draw up a sample. The float rose or sank depending on the acid's specific gravity, which told you exactly how much charge each cell was holding. A dead cell meant a dead battery, and this tool was the only way to know before you were stranded. Sealed, maintenance-free batteries killed it in the 1970s. Today, most men do not even know car batteries once had caps you could unscrew. Number 13, tubing flaring tool. Small metal clamp about the size of your fist with a set of dies and a threaded cone that screws down into the open end of a piece of steel tubing. If you needed to replace a brake line in 1955, you didn't buy a pre-made line. You bought a roll of steel tubing, cut it to length with a tubing cutter, and made the flared ends yourself. The tool pressed a double flare into the tubing so it could seat against the brake fitting without leaking. Your life depended on that flare holding under pressure. Today you buy pre-bent lines from a parts store or take the car to a shop. Most men under 40 have never seen a double flare, let alone made one with their own hands. Number 12, points file. Flat steel file about the size of a popsicle stick, thin enough to slide between two contact surfaces less than a quarter-inch apart. Every gasoline engine in America ran on breaker points, two small metal contacts, inside the distributor that opened and closed thousands of times per minute, triggering the spark that fired each cylinder. Those contacts wore down. They pitted. They burned. This file cleaned them. Every tune-up in every garage in America started with a points file and a feeler gauge. Chrysler had already made electronic ignition standard on every car they built in 1973. General Motors and Ford followed in 1975. The contact points disappeared, and the file that addressed them went from essential to meaningless in a single model year. Number 11, blowtorch. Not the blue propane torch you buy at the hardware store today. This is a brass cylinder about the size of a thermos with a curved nozzle on top and a small hand pump on the side. It looks like a piece of nautical equipment. You filled the tank with kerosene or white gasoline, pumped the handle to build pressure inside the cylinder, and lit the nozzle with a match. The flame was hot enough to sweat copper pipe, strip old paint down to bare wood, and thaw frozen water lines in January. Every plumber in America carried one. Every roofer owned one. Most home mechanics kept one on the shelf next to the firepot. Propane torches replaced them by the mid-1960s because propane was cleaner, safer, and didn't require priming. A man who has never seen a brass blowtorch would have no idea which end to hold. Number 10. Tire spoons. Two flat steel bars about 14 inches long, curved at both ends. They look like oversized butter knives. Before tire machines, you mounted and dismounted tires by hand. You'd break the bead loose with your boot heel, slide the spoons between the rubber and the rim, and lever the tire over the edge, one section at a time. On split rim wheels, the work was genuinely dangerous. The locking ring sat under tension, and if it released while you were working, it could come off with enough force to break bones or worse. Every garage had a set of tire spoons, and every man who used them regularly had the knuckle scars to prove it. Number 9, egg beater drill. A handle on top, a crank on the side, and two meshing gears that spin a small chuck at the bottom. It looks exactly like a kitchen egg beater, except the whisk is replaced with a drill bit. North Brothers Manufacturing of Philadelphia built these alongside their famous Yankee screwdrivers. The gear ratio multiplied your hand speed, so a slow, steady crank produced a fast spin at the bit. They were light, precise, and never needed a power outlet. Every garage had one for pilot holes and small work. The quarter-inch electric drill killed this tool decades before the cordless drill ever existed. Number 8, Yankee screwdriver. This is the one that gets the most blank stares. A steel shaft about 16 inches long with a spiral groove cut from end to end. Wooden handle on one end, a screwdriver bit on the other. You push the handle forward, and the spiral groove makes the shaft spin. Release it, and the spring snaps the handle back. Push again. Every push drives the screw deeper. North Brothers of Philadelphia patented this mechanism in 1895 and called it the Yankee. Stanley bought North Brothers in 1946 and kept making the tool for another 50 years. In its time, every carpenter, every electrician, every weekend mechanic had one within arm's reach. You could drive a screw in 2 seconds without a battery, without a cord, without electricity. Stanley discontinued the last Yankee model around 2005. 110 years of continuous production ended quietly. Most men alive today have never touched one. Number 7, Draw knife. What comes next is the tool most people won't even recognize as a tool. A 10-inch steel blade with a beveled edge and a wooden handle bolted to each end. The sharp edge faces toward you. You grip both handles, press the blade against a piece of wood, and pull the knife toward your chest. Every stroke peels a curl of wood off the surface. A skilled man could take off a shaving thinner than a playing card or hog off a quarter-inch in a single pass. The draw knife shaped axe handles, fence posts, chair legs, and anything else that needed to go from rough to round without sandpaper. In a 1950s garage, this was how you shaped wood when a power tool was either too aggressive or too expensive. Hand one to a man today, and he won't know which direction to hold it. Number 6, spoke shave. A small blade mounted between two low handles. The whole tool about 8 inches wide. It looks like a miniature airplane. The name tells you exactly what it was built for. Wagon spokes were round, and a flat plane couldn't follow a curve. The spokes could. The short sole rode the curve, while the blade shaved the wood smooth underneath. By the 1950s, nobody was making wagon wheels in their garage, but the spoke shave was still the only hand tool that could shape a curved surface cleanly. Furniture makers still use them today, but the last time one hung on a pegboard in an average American garage was probably 1965. Number 5, brace and bit. A crank shaped like the letter U with a chuck at one end and a round wooden knob at the other. You hold the knob against your chest or hip and sweep the crank in a full circle. This was the standard way to bore a large hole before electric drills existed. The U-shaped crank gave you massive leverage. A ratcheting mechanism let you work in tight spaces where a full sweep was impossible. Every 1950s garage had one, usually with a coffee can full of auger bits sitting next to it on the shelf. A brace could drive a 1-inch bit through a 4x4 in about 10 turns. No noise, no cord, no sparks, just your arm and a sharp bit. Number 4, hand crank bench grinder. A grinding wheel about 6 inches across, mounted on a cast iron frame that clamps to the edge of a workbench. Instead of a motor, there's a hand crank on the side connected through a set of gears. You held the tool against the spinning stone with one hand and turned the crank with the other. Mower blades, chisels, hatchets, cold chisels, anything with an edge came to this wheel. The trick was keeping even pressure against the stone while cranking at a steady speed. 2 hands, 2 different jobs, no room for mistakes. Electric bench grinders made them unnecessary by the early 1960s. Number 3, valve lapping tool. A wooden stick about 12 inches long with a rubber suction cup on the end. It looks like a toy. Every engine in a 1950s car had valves that sealed against a machine surface called a seat. Over time, carbon buildup and tiny imperfections broke that seal, and the engine lost compression. The fix was valve lapping. You pulled the valve out of the cylinder head, smeared a gritty abrasive compound on the valve face, pressed the suction cup onto the head of the valve, and rolled the stick between your palms like you were starting a campfire. Back and forth, grinding the valve and the seat into a perfect match. It was slow, it was tedious, and every man who worked on his own engine did it every spring. Modern hardened valve seats and improved metallurgy made lapping unnecessary by the late 1970s. The tool that every weekend mechanic owned became something no mechanic today has ever held. Number 2, dwell meter. An analog gauge about the size of a paperback book, a needle, a printed dial, and 2 wire leads with alligator clips. The dial reads in degrees, not volts, not amps. This tool measured the dwell angle, the number of degrees a distributor shaft rotated while the ignition point stayed closed and current flowed through the coil. Too much dwell and the points overheated, too little and the spark was weak. Every tune-up started with this meter clipped to the engine and a small Allen wrench adjusting the point gap while the motor idled. The correct reading was printed on a decal under the hood. In 1975, electronic ignition made contact points extinct. The dwell meter became a paperweight in a single year. Hand one to a mechanic under 40 and he won't know what the numbers on the dial mean, let alone where to connect the leads. Number 1, soldering copper. A heavy block of forged copper roughly the size of a hatchet head, mounted on the end of a steel rod with a wooden handle. The whole tool weighs close to 2 pounds. There is no cord, there is no plug, there is no heating element. You heated the copper block in a fire pot or on a stove until it reached the right color, then carried it to the work and pressed the hot copper flat against the joint. The mass of that copper block stored enough heat to melt solder for 30 seconds of continuous work before you had to reheat. It sealed rain gutters. It patched leaking radiators. It joined sheet metal on ductwork and downspouts. This was the only way to solder in a home garage before plug-in irons became common, and it took real skill. You had to read the color of the copper to know the exact moment the block was hot enough to flow solder without burning the flux off the joint. Too hot, and the solder ran everywhere. Too cold, and it wouldn't flow at all. Every tinsmith in America owned one. Every plumber carried one in his kit. And in a 1950s garage, it sat on a shelf next to a small cast iron fire pot, waiting for the next leaky joint. The next time you walk past a workbench in your grandfather's garage, look at the tools hanging on the wall. Every one of them required a man to understand the work before he could pick up the tool. That was the price, and it was the point. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.